All right, all right, all right. As we're getting into late February, welcome. Greetings from Grandpa Hoppy here again with the Retirement Chronicles, episode 5. So, been doing this for a couple weeks and had another thought came to my mind, and as we shared on our last episode, I talked about all my pills. I know I went long. It was 20 minutes long. I'm going to try to keep this to a minimum. Really don't ever want to have these talks over 10 minutes. 20 minutes is definitely for a mature listener. I used to be a youth minister for years, on and off for 20-something years. And I try to set a goal of 10 minutes for teenagers. If you go to adult sermons in most evangelical churches, 20 to 22 minutes is the norm. So that takes for a really mature listener to go that far, not being a professional speaker. So professional speakers know how to captivate longer, and they have a lot of practice at doing it. So they know how to package their speeches or their sermons. They have more experience to know how to get the listener to listen. But today's topic is people dying, famous people dying. I think I'm going to use that. Famous people dying. And of late, a couple come to mind, and I even did a what they call a YouTube short to try to get a new audience, and I used the theme of the Lonesome Dove theme in the background music. But Robert Duvall recently passed away. It's one of my favorite actors. There was way back when I was young, it was The Godfather, but really me and my wife's favorite show of all time is Lonesome Dove, and we have literally watched the whole Lonesome Dove series, the first one and all of them actually, but the first one we've watched probably a dozen times minimum, and that's no exaggeration. We loved Robert Duvall, and he was in his 60s when he made that, so he died at 95, I think. Another one that comes to mind that's very relevant to a lot of people that might be listening, that is in our lives, that have famous people that are dying, is Jesse Jackson has passed away. Not sure his illness, but I'm sure he was probably in his early 80s, maybe. He comes to mind personally because on that, if you remember that Martin Luther King march from Memphis to Jackson, Mississippi, it was after I believe his name was James Meredith. No, it's not James Meredith. Somebody on a earlier march. Yeah, I believe it was James Meredith. It was the first black student at Ole Miss. He got shot by birdshot on Highway 51 by a rogue person. It did put him in the hospital. He got shot by a shotgun at a longer distance, and they had to, he wasn't killed or anything like that, but Martin Luther King, a few weeks after that, or maybe a week after that, he and Jesse Jackson, and I believe it was, what's that, as another reverend, I can't remember his name, but they came marching down 51, and I was 3 years old, and I remember it was a big event. So it really made a big impression on me when that happened, because I was 3, and I remember them walking in front of my house. I lived on 51, just like a mile and a half from where that James Meredith got shot. So anyway, I remember Jesse Jackson. I don't remember him at 3 years old. I just remember the somewhat march, and I was standing out there with my grandfather, and I'm like, "What's happening, Papa?" And so that I always followed Jesse Jackson after that, and so he was, something in my memory. Jimmy Carter died last year. If you remember, he was active his whole life doing things after he became president. So he's kind of a presidential icon in our country. I don't think he was that great of a president, but he was a great man and did a lot of good things. Robert Redford comes to mind. I remember way back when, me being in, as retirement age, Robert Redford, it goes way back to, I remember a movie called Butch Cassidy, and I remember him being in that, kind of catapult him as a memory in my mind at a young age. I don't know when that was. I would say I was single digits. Remembering that in the 60s. Butch Cassidy, it was kind of like a big deal to see it on black and white TV. And he did a later movie with Barbara Streisand. I think it was called The Way We Were, and that was kind of a popular movie, romantic movie, that I remember seeing maybe in the 70s. Gene Hackman died last year. I definitely remember him in multiple movies. I'm thinking maybe Superman and a movie called Unforgiven. But the one I remember most, me being into sports, was the movie called Hoosiers. And that was a long time ago, but just a famous person that died. And then another one that died last year was Val Kilmer. And my favorite part, well, of course, he was in Top Gun, of course, but another one that I remember he was in that I thought was brilliant was Doc Holliday in the movie Tombstone, and Val Kilmer. Hulk Hogan died last year, and he's a very recent person that died. I just bring all this to say is we're older and we're seeing all these famous people die. And you think back in our own lives of people that had died, and those famous people that died recently that we were accustomed seeing in, say, movies or political people. But also I remember, on a more personal note, I spoke one time probably 25 years ago at Northwest Community College. They had a Baptist Union, the Baptist Student Union building. They had I say a club or a ministry where you would join, and they had a nightly meeting, weekly, one night a week. I think it was on Tuesday night. It was at Northwest Community College in Senatobia, Mississippi. They had about 75 students, maybe 100, something like that. And I was asked to speak because the regular person that was there was going to be gone. They would have guest speakers when their regular person, I believe it was John Mahoney was his name, would miss, and then they would get guest speakers to come speak. And I remember in that speech, I wanted to share, because I went to Northwest. That college was a junior college, and I went there like 4 years. I changed my major like 3 times. Maybe I didn't go 4 years straight, because I did go 2 years, and then I went to University of Memphis later, which was, back then it was Memphis State. But then I changed my major and I went back to Northwest a couple different times. If you add it all up, I had close to 100 hours at Northwest. It only takes 64 to graduate there, but maybe not 100, maybe that's an exaggeration, but I know I had close to 80. And, but, different majors. And one reason I always went to school, throughout 20 years, I kept going back to college and even vocational schools. I went to vocational schools even before Northwest when I was a high school student. I went to Northwest vocational schools to learn welding, and there was multiple small engine. There was multiple courses I took in high school me and my dad went to those classes to learn how to do things for skills. And but one reason is because the company I work for, FedEx, they paid your tuition. They would just pay you to go to school, and they were very lenient. I'm sure they're not like that anymore, but man, I just kept going and kept going because they kept paying all my. I felt like if I didn't take a class at all times, I was losing out on money from FedEx. But one reason why I kept going back. Anyway, I was asked to speak at Northwest at the Baptist Student Union meeting, and I said, what is something that has affected me here that really has been in my craw? And I remember when I went to when I was 19, 20 years old, and I went to Northwest, I remember that nobody from this student union ever really pursued to get me to come. At that moment in time, I didn't know Jesus. I was not saved. I went to church on Sundays growing up, but I never had a personal encounter with Jesus. And I never had anybody ask me to come or invite me or ask me, do I know Jesus? And I wanted to share that with this group of students that were faithful in they were faithful enough to join. And I wondered, did they have anybody ask them to join? Or did they just go because they're a faithful Christian and join? And I wanted to ask that question. But before I gave that speech that night, I remember I was like 34 years old, and I remember going back in my high school, and all the students that I knew and all the young people that I knew growing up to the 34-year mark, how many people did I know that had already died by 34 years old? And I tabulated a list of 30 names of people that I knew that were students, and I had casual relationships and some close relationships that I knew that I grew up with that were already dead by 34 years old. And I listed those names. I spoke on something, shared scripture, but then I listed those names and I challenged them. Have you asked anybody to come visit and be part of this group? Because when I went there, and this stepped on their toes, and they didn't ask me back, but I said, have you asked anybody? I said, because I never got asked to be a part of this. I had many years that I did not follow the Lord. I'm not blaming them for me being lost, but they did not have an evangelical moment with me. And I said, hopefully one of those 30 people that are already dead, they got asked. But their opportunities are no longer there. It was a defining moment in me just giving that speech. I don't know if there's any defining moments of them hearing that sermon, but then we encounter right now as a retired Chronicles episode 5 statement. What about lately? I don't know about you, but I know about me. My parents are gone now. My wife's, both her parents are gone. My wife's had close friends. Close friends. And about 5 of them left us within a 2-year period. I have had several close, immediate family members that have passed away at a young age. So getting old, we see all this. We see all this happen. And it's easy to reflect back and just like, we're still here. And one of the things that I just wanted to end this right here, before I give the farewell for today, getting old is a blessing. We need to live for today and really live for the Lord. But in Proverbs 16 it says, gray hair is the crown of glory. So it's a blessing for us to still be here. And so we can have a mission in that blessing, because you're wearing the crown of glory by having gray hair. It says it in Proverbs 16. So anyway, I want to end it today is guess what? You made it. You're in the age of the crown of glory. So farewell for today. And this is coming from a former lifeguard, former coffee salesman, former farmer, and currently I'm still a farmer. I have a small herd of longhorn cattle, registered longhorn cattle, few miniature donkeys, peacock. Still have a little farm. And farewell today, because he lives, from the Retirement Chronicles.